and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large.
This is Ruth McLeod, the Southern Atheist.
And we're very happy that you've tuned in for show number 4. We are just rolling these babies out like pancakes.
What? You don't roll a pancake.
Well, you can. Anyway, this was a fairly eventful week. We had some fun this week because Matt Dillahunty, and how does he identify? He's not a friendly atheist. He's sort of this extreme sort of atheist, really. He's got this show down in Texas that he does, and he's got he mentioned he had a Patreon page where he posts
the show
debates.
The show is called The Atheist Experience.
That's right, The Atheist Experience. And he came and spoke here locally at the Secular Hub, and for someone who I thought was an extreme atheist, he had some very sensible things to say and took a very moderate and tolerance-based view on current events, which I did not think he was going to do, and I was actually quite pleased about that. And some of that we'll be talking about in the show today, some of those events that were being talked about. As a note for our listeners out there, I've been posting the show on my YouTube channel, which is where you may be listening to it right now if you're not listening to it on iTunes or on the sensiblyspeaking.com website. But regardless of where you're listening to it, we've been getting comments from you guys, mostly on the YouTube channel, and we're very appreciative of those comments.
Yeah.
And we definitely want you to continue giving us feedback. We'd also appreciate it if you could go to iTunes and rate the show there, because they have a little 5-star rating system and reviews and such. And we're not necessarily looking for just 5-star reviews. Well, actually, yeah, we are. But we are looking for ratings on iTunes because that has some long-term effect on the future of the show and whatnot. And so I just wanted to put that plug in on there, and now I'm done with that. So one other thing I wanted to comment on that was something that I realized this week as a critical thinker, and I wanted to comment on it here is, it's very important to get all the ideas on issues. And I think that's something that, way too many of us don't necessarily take the time to do. It doesn't have to take a long time. It mainly takes being open to new ideas and being receptive to them so that when they do come across your radar, you don't just turn put the sunglasses on or the filter on or don't pay any attention to it, but you actually kind of stay open to those ideas because they keep your mind fresh and active. For example, and what prompts me to talk about this is I started looking at some things on religion and science history this week, and I found it to be quite enlightening. And I hadn't realized that in an effort to be a critical thinker, that I had sort of put some filters in place in regards to the subject of religion that I was sort of starting to take down this week. Only in that I am looking at other ideas because there's some historical information about science and history, and maybe those two subjects have not been as mutually exclusive as some people think.
No.
Throughout history, right? Well, I had been developing an idea that they were.
No, yeah.
And so it was good for me, and I figure, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, or whatever that expression is.
Good for the goose, good for the gander. Wow. Well, and I can see where you come from that mindset, because I came from it too. Not necessarily that they're completely devoid of each other, but they are, especially in some of the more quote-unquote controversial subjects, they are definitely worlds apart, but that's definitely not the case through and through.
The idea that they've always been that way is what I had developed as a false idea.
Right.
Right? That the Catholic Church was classically anti-science, for example, right?
Right. They're obviously not.
Well, apparently not. And not only in modern times, but actually we're talking about centuries ago, right? Because there's some ideas out there that are used to reason out why religion might be an inherently evil thing, which might not necessarily be totally true. And that's all I'm talking about, is that I'm being open to that idea. I'm not sitting here right now claiming the veracity of any of this, true, false, whatever. I'm just saying that by being open to the idea, we allow ourselves to be more active thinkers and have a broader view of situations. And so I wanted to encourage everybody in that particular direction.
So actually, to the effect of what we just said,
Mm-hmm.
there is a quote from Aristotle that says it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. So I think that is what you're trying to say.
That's, Aristotle is just like so good at that kind of thing. He just like puts me to shame, like with those like awesome quotes.
Yeah, but I'm sure he had a few things that just came out to him on the fly, but I'm sure he was able to sit down and think about a lot of things before they became catchphrases.
Probably so. That wacky Aristotle. Okay, now we had a couple of questions from a couple of our listeners, and thought I would take these up first before we get into our news segment here. One of them, I'm not trying to turn this into another Q&A episode, because I have my own Q&A show, but for us, people might have questions, and this first one is for me, but the second one's not, and so we'll take these up. And this is from an anonymous listener. Do you have an estimate of where Scientology ranks in the dangerous category as to size of membership? Are they number 5, number 50, number 500, or is there any way to even hazard a guess? The church itself would probably say they are the fastest growing non-cult religion in the world, but we both know they are neither fast growing nor are they a non-cult. And yes, that is very, very true. They are absolutely, by every metric and standard you could use, Scientology is a destructive cult. Mm. Now, that being said, there are 5,000 or so destructive cults in the world, according to Steve Hassan, an authority that I trust in regards to destructive cults. He's written about that at length, especially in his book, Combating Cult Mind Control. Out of 5,000, I'm not going to say Scientology is number 8 or number 888, because I don't know where they stand in the general scheme of things. But I did pull up a couple figures that I thought might put it in perspective. The Mormon group, the Latter-day Saints, which I consider a destructive cult for various reasons, have 14 million members worldwide. Wow. Now, that's a big group. And I don't have any particular reason to doubt those numbers. I don't think the Mormons falsely inflate their numbers. And it's clear that they are a very large, very international group. So then you have the Jehovah's Witnesses, which I'm absolutely positive are a destructive cult, having interviewed an ex-member fairly recently and looked into that group. And the Royal Commission in Australia investigating them, I think, would agree with me on this.
Yep.
They have 7.86 million members worldwide, not a small group, and again, no reason to doubt those figures. They could fill up a baseball or football stadium if they wanted to. And the Moonies, now this is a group that used to be quite large, they're down to about 15 to 25,000 members in the United States, which also happens to be about the size of Scientology. So we're talking about, a very small group in the relative scheme of things. I'd say probably in terms of the 5,000 plus destructive cults worldwide, most of them probably are very, very small. And some of them could be, measured in tens of people. But in terms of, as far as Scientology goes, I would say they are relatively low on the totem pole in terms of membership numbers. So
I don't think they'd want you to know that information.
Well, the interesting thing about Scientology is they're practically infamous at this point for falsely inflating their numbers. They've been claiming since the late 60s, they've been claiming millions of members.
Right.
And every year, because, they don't publish an annual report, but on a yearly basis, they're very number driven internally. So once they claim this figure, well, nobody inside the church, or very few people inside the church, actually have access to what the real membership figures are.
Okay.
So they would, once they've said, oh, well, we have 8 million members, well, the next year, it better not be 7.
Right.
So it has to be 9, and then 10, and then you get Kirstie Alley going on Howard Stern's show recently saying tens of millions of members, which it's just farcical. It's so exaggerated. It's not even
That's adorable.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So this is a group that struggles to get 5,000 people in Los Angeles to show up at the Shrine Auditorium for one of their international events where their, fearless leader shows up to do speeches. Los Angeles is, without a doubt, the highest concentration of Scientologists on the planet. So if they can't even fill up the Shrine Auditorium, you're talking about a very small group of people.
Gotcha.
The second question comes to us from listener Andy, who says, "Hello, Ruth and Chris. Congratulations for putting up another interesting podcast. Both of you make no bones about having a liberal worldview and political leanings. Question: is it possible to be a conservative and or a Republican and at the same time and have and use common sense, skepticism, and a healthy dose of critical thinking? From the way you denigrate those with a conservative bent, it seems the answer would be no. Like oil and water, they don't mix. I'd like to know your opinions on this."
There are definitely conservative, atheist, agnostics, secular, freethinker people. Absolutely.
And I totally agree. I would not say in any universe is it that Republicans or conservatives are excluded from having common sense, skepticism, and a healthy dose of critical thinking. Not by a long shot.
No.
And in fact, this question prompted me to make my little statement there about critical thinking at the beginning of the show.
And I will even say this. Just a few months ago, the American Humanist Association was here in Denver, and I was able to go with the Secular Hub. We had a booth there. There was another woman there who had a booth, and I kind of wasn't sure what to think about her because she was by herself the entire time. But her sign said "Humanist for Life," and I didn't know what that meant. I thought maybe it was a lifetime membership or something. We ended up going and speaking to her. She was actually anti-abortion, and that surprised the heck out of me. But she had a darn good argument. I'll give it to her. She knew what she was talking about. I'm not going to get into it. That's not my thing. But yeah, there are definitely pro-life secular people. There are definitely libertarian secular people, and there are even one of my own cousins is Pastafarian. That's what he likes to call himself, which is of course Flying Spaghetti Monster. But he is very much pro-gun and very much libertarian and almost Tea Party, which scares me a little. He's completely rational human being. I really respect the guy, not just because he's family, just because he's a good person. And absolutely, they're out there, and we may disagree on some social issues. We may disagree on a few regulatory issues, but other than that, when it comes to somebody having a standpoint on their religion, you're going to have multiple people from all sorts of backgrounds having all sorts of different beliefs. And they're able to be there. They're able to be skeptics, open-minded, critical thinkers, absolutely. Their political leanings don't always dictate everything about them.
Well, exactly, and a very good point, because I consider myself somewhat liberal in my political stance, whereas I used to be extremely conservative. Mm-hmm. I mean, back in the early 90s, I was an avid Ditto head.
Oy.
Oh yeah, and I read his books. I listened to his radio show. I thought Rush really had it together, and I have since completely pendulum swung the other direction in terms of those views. But those are mostly social views. Those are not necessarily even political. Like I don't have myself affiliated with one political party. I vote by candidate, not by party.
Right.
And financially, fiscally, I tend to be conservative.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I've posted articles about and made videos about the harm that labels cause.
Right.
You label somebody Democrat, you label somebody liberal, and now your whole worldview of them, your whole view of them is in a box. You've put them in a box.
Right.
And now you don't have to think about them anymore. But I think people are more complicated than that.
Right, absolutely.
So I resist those kinds of things, and I am willing to grant anyone at any end of the political, social, religious spectrum at anywhere along the line, I will grant anybody has common sense, skepticism, and a healthy dose of critical thinking if they demonstrate that.
Right.
And that's the only gauge I use. I don't say somebody's a conservative, therefore they're idiots.
Right. And I would not definitely say someone is an atheist, therefore they're a genius.
Exactly. Good. Exactly. It goes both ways.
It absolutely goes both ways.
And I've certainly found, and this is important, that there are, when I started talking about conspiracy theories, I found no shortage of people commenting on my sites about how they were critical thinkers and they have no idea what critical thinking actually is, what its principles are. They didn't know what something simple in critical thinking, logic, reason, like an ad hominem attack. The guy didn't even know what that was. He had no idea what a logical argument actually consisted of. And I don't mean this in some academic sense. I mean, I asked him, what is your argument? And he goes, I don't know what you mean because I don't know what an argument is. And I'm like, but you're telling me you're a critical thinker. You're telling me that you apply logic and reason to your conspiracy theories. How am I supposed to grant that you're a critical thinker if you can't talk intelligently about critical thinking? So that's where I kind of realized that again, labels don't necessarily grant anything, because you get people who will claim to be critical thinkers who are not.
I'm having a problem with someone saying they don't know what an argument is. A
logical argument. Which is a very specific thing, right? It's not the same thing as like we're going to now fight. It's not that kind of argument.
No, yeah. I'm sure we've all had that, that class or teacher somewhere along the way. I had it in college where somebody had to sit down and say, look, an argument isn't just people screaming at each other.
Exactly. You're putting forth a premise. You have a thesis. You have evidence that is backing up that premise. These are the elements of an argument.
Right.
This isn't, and it's not rocket science. I learned about this stuff in 5 minutes.
Right.
I'm not claiming college degrees because I don't have one. I'm not claiming that I had to go off to school to learn this stuff because I didn't. Anybody can learn it. Well, no, but the point is anybody can learn it. It doesn't take a long time. So
I have a book on my coffee table that looks like a children's book, and it has bad arguments. That's what it's called.
That's right. That's a great book. I love that book. Anyway, point being that to fully answer the question, Andy, I don't think either one of us are we're trying very hard to not allow our personal biases or personal viewpoints to get in the way of common sense, skepticism, and a healthy dose of critical thinking, because that's what we're trying to base this show around.
Right. And I may say this. I don't have as much practice as you, Chris, on some things. I really don't. But, I have my book.
Right. And that's the whole point.
Right.
Is that anybody can do this.
Right.
I've never approached this from anything other than a common man. Let's all just be sensible and let's just see where we go.
And I can only assume that you came to me to ask me to set up this podcast with you because I have a little bit of intelligence somehow.
A little bit. We are now going to move on. Hey, if you guys have any other questions for us, just leave them in the comments. Email us through the sensiblyspeaking.com website. We both have emails at ruth@sensiblyspeaking.com or chris@sensiblyspeaking.com. And now we're going to go on to our next segment. The first item we want to take up in the news today has to do with following up on Kim Davis. We spoke about her last week, and this is the county clerk in Rowan County, down in Moorhead, Kentucky, who has now gone to jail because of her refusal to sign off on marriage certificates, marriage licenses for same-sex couples. And I'm going to go through a couple points in the New York Times article from today. Kim Davis standing ground as gay couples get licenses. At least 6 same-sex couples received marriage licenses here for the first time on Friday, ending a standoff that had put this small Appalachian city into the national spotlight. And Kim Davis, the Rowan County clerk, who was jailed for refusing to issue licenses to same-sex couples, was prepared to remain in jail until the issue is resolved in a way that does not conflict with her religious beliefs, her husband and her lawyer said. Here's 2 things I know. This is a quote. She's not going to resign and she's not going to violate her conscience, said Matthew D. Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, the conservative legal group representing Ms. Davis. So however long that lasts in terms of the consequences, she is prepared to accept them. She will never violate her conscience or betray her God, Mr. Staver said, adding that he expected to file an appeal of the contempt ruling. Defenders of Ms. Davis and some politicians called for changes in state law to resolve the standoff. Mr. Staver said, for example, that Ms. Davis would agree to record licenses issued by the clerk's office rather than in the name of the clerk herself. Judge Bunning's decision to jail Ms. Davis went beyond the wishes of the couple who sued the clerk. Their lawyers had asked that she be fined. Some advocates for gay rights quickly expressed concern that Ms. Davis's jailing would make her a sympathetic figure to religious conservatives and prompt lawmakers in Kentucky and elsewhere to push for new laws carving out exemptions for public officials who oppose same-sex marriage.
I'm not thrilled with seeing her go to jail.
Why not?
I don't think that's what anybody seeks to do to another person. Making someone spend some time in jail, away from their home, away from their family. No one wants to do that for another person, especially for something as trivial as this argument.
Well, I would say that there are some people who want her to see in jail time, and in fact, according to the story, there were some who were wanting her to be fined as well.
Right. There needs to be some sort of repercussions or consequences to someone disobeying the law, and it's not a civil disobedience thing that I think is happening here.
Oh, you don't think that?
Not necessarily.
Okay, because the point that I wanted to make on this is that I believe that this is a case of Kim Davis practicing civil disobedience. In fact, there's not even really a lot of question about the fact that that's what she's doing, but it's nonviolent civil disobedience.
There's not a question?
No, well, I mean, she is being civilly disobedient, right? She's taken a moral stance against what she perceives as an immoral or unethical law. And is that not civil disobedience?
But she wasn't doing it as a civilian, though. That's my own issue with it.
Okay.
If she was a civilian against this, fine. She wants to not be a part of it, fine. The thing is, she did this as a public official. Mm-hmm. I think that's where it really cuts down to the fact that this isn't a civil disobedience. This is an elected official who is just straight up denying people's rights. And I think that's why it's not civil disobedience, which is why she was taken to court.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this for a second, because...
Oh, we're gonna disagree.
Well, awesome. I think we will, but here's why, right? Let me just do devil's advocate for a second here, which is she does not think that she is denying somebody else their rights. She feels, I think, if I'm not entirely in her headspace, but I believe that she feels that this is an illegal law. In other words, it's a law that's been passed that's immoral, that she can't agree with, because what she said on the stand is that marriage is between a man and a woman. And she said that very tearfully to the judge. I mean, this is
right.
This
is where she's at, something right? That she's very passionate about.
Very much so.
I completely understand it, but just because you're very passionate about it doesn't make you correct.
Oh no! Don't mistake me for saying that she's in a correct position here.
I wasn't. No. I'm hoping she needs to eventually understand this.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think she's going to. And there's a whole class of people, her supporters, who believe that the Supreme Court made a gross and glaring mistake. Now, some of the quotes about this have been, I will use the word irresponsible, on the part of some of the people, Ted Cruz, who are making some quotes about this and are doing some grandstanding with this issue.
Well, let's hear some of those quotes, because I'm curious. What did Mr. Ted Cruz say?
Well, let me just look it up here. According to Steve Bannon from MSNBC, Ted Cruz has said the following here. Quote, "Today, judicial lawlessness crossed into judicial tyranny. Today, for the first time ever, the government arrested a Christian woman for living according to her faith. This is wrong. This is not America. I stand with Kim Davis. Unequivocally, I stand with every American that the Obama administration is trying to force to choose between honoring his or her faith or complying with a lawless court opinion." Now, that's the quote.
Lawless court opinion. I just want to make sure everybody heard that.
Yeah.
Lawless court opinion.
Now, I think we're going to agree on the fact that Ted Cruz is making a grandstanding and making an extremely irresponsible statement as a politician here, because, one, this issue has absolutely nothing to do with the Obama administration. It has to do with the Supreme Court, which is the third branch of our government. It is not the executive branch. And this also has to do with the law. So to say that the Supreme Court is somehow a lawless authority undermines the entire structure of the United States government.
Yeah.
And this is a man who seeks to be president of the United States. So I find this quote to be extremely objectionable. Now, those are some of the people who are sort of riding on the coattails of this and trying to use this issue for their own political agenda. So thank you very much, Ted Cruz. But coming back to Kim Davis personally, and I think that there are some other issues at play here, specifically with the Liberty Counsel, which is the nonprofit group that is backing up Kim Davis and giving her free pro bono legal support. But we can get into that in a little bit. As far as Kim Davis goes, she's not wrong for standing her ground in regards to her morals or what she believes to be right.
No.
She's wrong because she's got a job that specifically says you do A, B, and C. It's a very simple job.
There are many other county clerks who did not agree with this ruling to allow same-sex marriage. They resigned.
Exactly my point.
That's the difference.
That's right.
And there are some other ones in Kentucky who did the same thing as her. They just weren't picked as their figurehead by the Liberty Counsel.
Right.
And I'm not so sure she wanted to go this far. I wonder if they kind of pushed her to that.
Well, I think that they were a bit surprised by the fact that she ended up with jail time.
Well, yeah, I think everybody was.
Yeah, I don't think that was necessarily the expected outcome, but I'm almost positive that those at the Liberty Counsel are probably high-fiving right now over the fact that they now have a martyr.
Somebody in their PR department is having a drink right now. They're thrilled.
Exactly.
Absolutely thrilled.
And if you go to www.lc.org, you will see what the Liberty Counsel is and what it's all about. Their website here says, restoring the culture by advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and the family, which is the very PR version of saying that they are an extreme religious right group who have formed up a nonprofit group. And the first thing that comes to mind for me on this is this group is very much skirting the line of nonprofit okayness because they're very heavily involved in the legal and political process,
right?
Which I don't believe tax-deductible organizations are supposed to be doing. According to their website, the purpose of this ministry is to preserve religious liberty and help create and maintain a society in which everyone will have the opportunity to discover the truth that will give true freedom. Now, again, this is the very NPR way of saying that they are backing up extreme Christian values in such a way that they've couched this under the term freedom, which I find objectionable because, of course, they are not allowing others the freedom to engage in the lifestyle or the life that they want, which is perfectly legal, the perfectly legal lifestyle that I'm talking about now. And, of course, this now includes same-sex marriage. So I'm not really too impressed by this Liberty Counsel or the various things that they are trying to accomplish. And I think that they got hold of Kim Davis and are pushing this agenda forward because what they're trying to do is get the law undermined by getting exceptions or exemptions for political officials like Kim Davis, elected officials, who, because of their conscience, now don't have to follow the law. And that's not necessarily, I think, the way to go about handling this situation if you want to be on the up and up.
Right. And part of me just wants to sit here and scream that this can't be civil disobedience because she's just plain wrong. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. It doesn't matter what her opinion. And I just don't think... I don't believe that this can be classified as civil disobedience when it's from a public official.
Okay.
That's just where I'm going to sit on this one until
I
have better arguments against.
I would disagree with you simply because Kim Davis is a person first and a public official second. And I want to make it clear that I am not siding with Kim Davis in regards to the position she's taken because I think she's dead wrong. are listening to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. Isn't it about time someone made some sense around here? Okay, so of course I'm going to invoke Godwin's law now to make the point of my comparison with Kim Davis and civil disobedience. Godwin's law is the internet adage that as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1. That is, if an online discussion goes on long enough, sooner or later someone will compare someone or something to Hitler or Nazism. And in this case, here's the comparison I want to make.
Are you going to Hitler?
I am, but here's how I'm saying it.
Oh, Lord.
Would you find it objectionable if a Nazi concentration camp superintendent or commandant had engaged in civil disobedience by defying Hitler's orders to gas the Jews in the concentration camp?
I still don't think I'd call that civil disobedience. I think I'd call that someone getting a damn conscience.
Well, that's exactly how Kim Davis feels. She feels that she is operating on her conscience.
Yeah, she feels all sorts of things. That doesn't mean it's going to be civil disobedience.
Well, okay, we just have a different idea of what civil disobedience is.
We do, and that's the thing. Civil disobedience can be, we were just talking about this, can be defined as many different things.
It can.
It's kind of hard to really pinpoint what is civil disobedience anymore.
Well, that's very true, and there is a can of worms to open up on that, which I don't really want to get into here. But it is true that civil disobedience as a term covers a lot of different forms of protest or disagreement, from lawful protest demonstration, nonviolent civil disobedience, and violent civil disobedience. And of course, I am going to take a moderate approach on this, where I'm not going to say somebody assassinating the president or inciting riots or engaging in arson is engaged in civil disobedience.
Well,
I think that is
civil.
Well, it's non-civil disobedience, but it's still classified under this umbrella term of civil disobedience. So, anyway,
I will say this to Kim Davis. I did read that when she was sentenced to jail, she just said thank you. I'm glad that she didn't sit there and argue with the guy. I mean, at least take it gracefully. Fall on your sword gracefully.
Well, I will classify what she's doing under the umbrella of civil disobedience, because that's what I believe she's doing. And I only bring this point up, and we're only harping on it because I think that there have been a number of memes and personal attacks made against her.
Right.
And I think that those are unwarranted attacks. I don't think that attacking her character, her religious beliefs, her divorce history, or her own life is a mature or intellectually sound way of attacking what's going on here.
Right. And
I think that she should be supported in the fact that she feels morally obligated to not follow what she considers to be an immoral law. Good.
Fine.
Great. We're okay with that.
Fine.
We're not okay with the fact that she holds public office and is doing that.
Right.
And we're not okay with the fact that she be allowed to do that.
Right. She is allowed to have her own religious standpoint. Everyone is. She is not allowed to force her standpoint onto other people. And that's what she's doing. And just like you said, my first reaction when I started to see this woman more and more and more on TV is like, why wouldn't she try to dress better? Why wouldn't she try to put her hair nicer? Why wouldn't she try to put on makeup? But that was just my own personal hang up that I had in my head, because I know if I was getting national attention, I'd put on some lipstick. I mean, whatever. And you're absolutely right. That was incredibly childish of me to immediately go there. But I wasn't
thinking about you. I was thinking about these people who are putting up these memes about how she should be stoned because she's been divorced 4 times.
Yeah, and that's the thing, though. That was the first reaction that came to my head.
Right.
But I didn't post about it because I immediately thought, well, that was a completely ridiculous thing for me to try to point out. And just like you said at the beginning of our podcast tonight, Matt Dillahunty, when we saw him, said, so she's been married 4 times. Who cares? So she had kids with one husband before she divorced the other. Who cares?
That's right.
Who cares?
That's right.
That's not
and those
what
of you
matters.
out there who think that this is some gross violation of the Bible and therefore she's a hypocrite, it needs to be said that her beliefs are New Testament beliefs, not Old Testament beliefs, at least according to what I've been reading today. So, what her beliefs are her beliefs. And so to condemn her for her beliefs is kind of doing the same thing that, we accuse them of doing as bigots.
Right.
And I don't think it's a constructive argument or a constructive way to express your disagreement with what she's doing.
Right. And just like I wouldn't want anybody to attack me about the way that I look or the way that I sound or anything like that, I would not want to do that to this person, to her beliefs. I'm just upset or frustrated with the fact that this woman has her personal beliefs and she is in a power position to force that onto people who do not agree with her. That is the issue here. It's not what she's done in her past, even though Jesus talked about divorce. He said nothing about homosexuality. Fine. We're not gonna harp on that. It's really her position and how she was able to lord it over other people.
Fair enough.
There you go.
And we're going to move on to our next story now, because I think we've made our points about Kim Davis.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about her anymore.
All right. Now, we've got a very disconcerting story out of Beirut this week. This is the sort of thing that actually, pisses me off, to be blunt. And this was on Yahoo News. This was actually, from Reuters. The story goes, satellite images confirm major temple destroyed in Syria's Palmyra, according to the United Nations. Satellite images have confirmed the destruction of the Temple of Bel, which was one of the best preserved Roman-era sites in the Syrian city of Palmyra, a United Nations agency said, after activists said the hardline Islamic State group had targeted it. And there were some comparisons of photos made. And the agency, quote, we can confirm the destruction of the main building of the Temple of Bel, as well as a row of columns in its immediate vicinity. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights Monitoring Group and other activists said on Sunday that Islamic State had destroyed part of the more than 2,000-year-old temple, one of Palmyra's most important monuments. This came a week after the militants blew up another smaller site in the central desert city. Palmyra was one of the most important cultural centers of the ancient world, according to cultural agency UNESCO, which has described it as the crossroads of several civilizations.
See, this might pisses you off. This hurts my heart. I have no other thing to say than I just sit at my desk every single time I read one of these articles where they have destroyed another artifact that will never get back, and I just cry. I don't know how else to react to someone being so upset or thinking that they are being so... They're so concerned that this is going to go against their God or this is going to somehow hurt their cause. This 3,000-year-old temple, this 10,000-year-old temple, these artifacts that are thousands of years old, whatever they are, what have you, they're somehow going to tarnish their current religion. I don't understand this concept. It was basically a pile of rubble that resembled a temple to start with, and now they basically wiped it off the planet. There's no reason for this. And I'm getting emotional as I'm speaking about it right now. These are things that were created by humans thousands of years ago, before we had giant pieces of equipment to move stones all over the place. They sat there, they carved, they painted, they took time and effort for years to put these things together. And they blow it up with some freaking chemical crap they put together within 5 minutes, and I'm surprised they didn't blow themselves up to start with.
Right.
And they just wipe it off the face of the earth for no other reason than it's competition for their God.
And this is something that has a lot of precedent in history. This has gone on for centuries and centuries. When the Crusaders came riding into Egypt, back in the day, they made sure to chisel Christian crosses, those Crusader crosses, into the Egyptian columns.
That pisses me off too.
Well, it does me too. I'm just saying this is something that's been going on, with religious groups for many, many, many years. It always upsets me because it's destroying heritage sites, historical sites, and in the name of religion. And when people wonder why I have certain views against organized religion, it's because it creates this kind of mindset in people that they have to destroy something that somebody else believes in order for themselves to feel better about themselves or their own beliefs, because they cannot stomach a tolerant viewpoint or a tolerant world where people can live together with differing ideas about something that they have absolutely no proof of or evidence of at all. And this is the sort of thing that actually gets me really riled up about this.
Yeah, you sound really riled up.
Well, I'm speaking very calmly because when I get really riled up, this is how I talk.
Oh, you're one of those.
I am.
No, but
You're very rarely going to hear me screaming, especially into a microphone on the show here. But I can tell you that this is one of the things that I really do feel it inside myself, because it's wanton destruction, and it's completely unacceptable.
And I just want to point out, if someone were destroying these artifacts to build a multi-million-dollar mall or something, I'd be equally pissed off. And this is not me harping on religion once again.
Fair enough.
I would be upset if someone did this for money motivations. I would be upset if someone said, it's ruining my view. I don't care. You destroy history. That's really upsetting to me. If someone says, well, we're going to, destroy the Auschwitz camp. Let's not, because that is something to remind us of our past, whether it was good or bad. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it was bad. But it's the reason that we have history textbooks, the reason that we have museums is to remember our past, good or bad, so that we can learn from it, so that we can grow from it, so that we can be absolutely fascinated in these 3,000-year-old temples. And you keep destroying them, we're not going to have them.
Exactly. Don't even get me started on the Library of Alexandria.
Let's all have a moment of silence for the Library of Alexandria.
Very good. Our moment has passed. And I like I said, I'm not even going to let myself go there, because I consider that to be one of the most heinous atrocities in the entire history of mankind. More knowledge lost in a night than has been regained in all that time since. So
why would you burn knowledge?
So we're now going to move on to our next story.
The next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to touch on the murders of Alison Parker and Adam Ward. We all saw on August 26th, we all heard about it on the news or on social media eventually, that these two reporters were killed live on the scene, on air. Alison Parker was a young reporter. She did a lot of what some people would call fluff pieces, and Adam Ward was her photographer and cameraman. And if anybody is ever in the media, they know that an on-scene reporter and their cameraman are usually very close together all the time, in the back of a truck somewhere, on scene doing things. They were on TV doing a piece, and a very disgruntled ex-employee of the station showed up and shot them on camera, live, and also shot the woman that they were interviewing. Her name is Vicki Gardner, who was the executive director of the local Chamber of Commerce. They were doing a story on tourism. And this basically has sparked a debate about, in one, social media's role in covering things like this, murders and things like this, and two, gun laws.
One thing that we noticed in looking through the comments on this, and this really needs this, I don't think that this can be commented on enough in this particular day and age of social media, as the hateful comments that were made in this story on social media and in comments to the news story here against all black people, against Black Lives Matter, against President Obama. I couldn't believe, reading through some of these things, how we have now equated almost any random act of violence that occurs in a country of millions of people with it somehow being President Obama's fault.
Thanks, Obama.
Seriously. Or it's because of the Black Lives Matter movement, or people commenting on how when a couple of white people get killed, the white people don't riot. it's a form of blatant racism that I find extremely disturbing.
Well, to kind of counter that, even though as horrific as this was, and as not as horrific, but equally disgusting, the comments that you will see on articles about it, when that kid in South Carolina walked into a predominantly black church and shot people in the middle of a Bible study, we had the entire, nation basically banning Confederate flags all of a sudden.
Right. As though this was the thing that needed to be handled in order to handle racial tension.
Right.
Right. Yes, of course, that should have been done a long time ago.
Right.
No problem with that. Racial tensions in this country are real. They do exist.
Absolutely.
Racial prejudice exists. The Black Lives Matter movement has a point.
Yes.
Now, if there are extremists in that group who are advocating violence, I ain't behind that.
Nope.
But we can't use any extremists in any group or movement to represent the entire group or the entire movement.
Right.
We can't do that with Muslims. We can't do that with the religious right. Right. The Westboro Baptists, I think everybody will agree, do not represent Christians in general.
ISIS does not represent Muslims.
Exactly. And so I don't think that extremists in Black Lives Matter group represent all black people. Right. We have a problem in this country with this stuff.
Right.
And these shootings highlight and bring those things to a head. Mm-hmm. And then we all kind of rumble around and the media sort of rolls around in the mud talking about this stuff. And then we move on.
Right.
And with this particular issue, with the reporters being shot, we have a gun control issue.
Right.
And that actually is all I wanted to comment on this story. But it does lead us into our next segment. In this week's What Are You Talking About?, I would like to discuss the issue of gun control because this is something that has been a source of endless frustration for a lot of people because we have mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting, more so in the United States than it seems anywhere else in the world, and literally nothing gets done about it. And if there is anything that has got me more exasperated and more deflated in terms of being able to enact any kind of social change, it is gun control. We are, up in arms, so to speak, over the issue of, gun violence in the United States. It is a very real issue. It is a very serious problem. And yet no legislation of any kind, no social change of any kind, can seem to move forward, and I'm frankly baffled by it. I'm not an anti-gun owning type of person. I'm not somebody who's anti-Second Amendment, and I think that there are some very valid points to be made about gun ownership, and I think that the Second Amendment says what it says. And I think that it's, not necessarily an inherently evil amendment. But when you have incident after incident after incident of, men, women, and children being killed over, in these mass shootings, we have got to do something different. So that's what I am trying to figure out right now as to what it is that we should be doing about that. And I'm actually bringing this up on our show here because I would like to enlist your commentary on this issue. I'd like to know what you guys out there think about this because I don't have any cast iron solution right now. I'm not sure what to do about this issue. The best I've been able to come up with within the parameters of the law and the Bill of Rights are heavier legislation in terms of gun licensing, gun owner training. We have the requirement that anybody who's going to drive a car has to go take classes and get trained and then get a license before they're legally okay to be driving a car around. I don't see why we don't have the same kind of mandatory training for guns, for example.
I don't disagree with you, Chris. Maybe this is my Southern heritage coming out of me. Mm-hmm. I will say this. You can teach someone how to use a gun all day and all night long. Someone can go out and buy a gun legally any day. these shootings are going to keep happening. You can regulate them as much as you want. They're going to keep happening.
Well,
with the types of regulations that we have right now. People can do everything legally right now, and this will keep happening.
Well, that's why I'm starting to wonder whether the Australian solution might be more of a necessary solution for the United States, regardless of the Second Amendment. And unfortunately, what I think that we're running up against, and I don't think that this is a conspiracy-minded point of view, because I think that, conspiracy theorists get a little bit wild and crazy with their global world views of, 12 men controlling the world. And those are the sort of conspiracy theories I rail against. We have a $1 billion industry between gun manufacturers and the NRA in the United States. Australia did not have the NRA to contend with, and I don't know how much the gun lobby exists down there. But they rallied as a nation, according to what I've read about this, and they passed pretty restrictive gun laws. It might be thought out there that nobody in Australia can own a gun, and that's not true at all.
No.
There are simply more restrictive laws about it. And for example, you can't own a 45 or a 44 Magnum. Right? You can own a 38. You can be a sports shooter. You can be a hunter. You can have guns as a security guard. You can have guns to protect your property. You can have guns to go out and kill animals if you need to, because, it's Australia, it's the outback. I mean, they got real animal issues out there.
Things that want to kill you.
Exactly.
Every day.
So it's not that nobody in Australia can't have a gun.
Right.
It's that they have put more sensible laws in place to regulate guns. And it's not that there is no gun violence in Australia, because there is. But I think, and this is just me saying I think, because I don't know yet, but I think that they have a better handle on their gun issue than the United States does because of these more restrictive gun laws, and I think that's the direction we need to be going in. Right now, I'm just dismayed at the fact that nothing will happen.
Right.
And this has got to change.
Another thing that brings me, my little delicate Southern heart, almost to tears, is to think about we've had people shot live on TV. We've had people shot and killed in Bible study. We've had people shot while going to the movies, while sitting in the park, while filling up their gas tank. We've had people shot doing everything. We've had a room full of children getting shot.
Right.
High school students, kindergartners. Nothing has been done.
Exactly. It's not a matter of we need something else to happen.
Right.
It's that we need to wake the hell up.
We need something.
That this is a real problem. And I don't think the majority of Americans are really gun nut, gun-toting, crazy people. I don't think that's where the majority of people are.
No.
But I'm asking for commentary on this, because I'd really like to know what our viewers think about this, our listeners.
No.
And what you have to say about it out there, because I'm curious, and I'd like to see what is it we need to do, because I think if you're going to advocate that there isn't a problem, you've got to be on Mars.
Right.
Like I can't imagine that even anybody listening right now who thinks that they have a full right and protection of the Bill of Rights to own guns, and you do. But if you think that in an extreme fashion that it's all black and white, that it's total ownership or no ownership, that's not what I'm advocating.
Right.
Right? That's not the position here. I'm begging you to please not give me comments about how they're going to have to pry your gun out of your cold, dead hands, and you don't want Obama coming and taking your guns. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm wondering what a solution would be to the violence, the completely out of control gun violence in the United States.
And some more to your point about Australia's regulations about them. I grew up not in a family that had guns. We did not have guns in my house. My father, his house, he had guns, but I did not grow up with him. So I didn't shoot a gun until I was college age, 20s. And it wasn't a great experience for me. Not my thing. But random fun fact, I'm not even sure if you know this information, Chris. I throw knives.
I did not know that.
It's a hobby of mine. something I picked up from a friend along the way. There are regulations about what size gun or what size knife I can have.
Right.
There are certain like the knives that I throw, I'm not allowed to walk around with.
Right.
I mean, we things that are not in the Constitution. They were like, oh yeah, absolutely, I have to put all these regulations on this. Right. So I'm not trying to take anybody's guns away. I completely understand why people will want to have them. They're cool. They're for protection, but there are so many guns in this country that were not bought to protect themselves from animals or to go, oh, well, military might show up at my door. And I'm sorry, we have the most overfunded military in the entire world multiple times over. If they show up at your door and you've got a pea shooter, bring it.
Right. Well, the whole I have to finally admit, after years of railing against the idea of this, I have to say that the idea of the Second Amendment existing to support a local militia in the case of a tyrannical government there's just no other word for it except outmoded, archaic think.
Yeah.
Because if the government comes down on us, there's very little we're going to be able to do in this day and age to stop them, as witnessed by the police raids of people's houses where they just barge in and in a matter of seconds the entire family is subdued, right?
Right.
And if you have a gun, it just makes matters worse, not better.
Right.
So the idea that you're going to take down the U.S. military coming to your house, we're past that point.
Right. Am I saying that because we can't do it, don't pretend that you can't? Sure, fine, whatever. If you want to be one of those doomsdayer people, go for it. All I'm saying is that there are so many guns, thousands, millions of guns in the United States that are solely meant for shooting other people, and I don't. As a humanist, that hurts me. I just don't understand.
I agree completely.
That concept.
Exactly. So we're not, I support the right to it.
Yes.
I support the Bill of Rights, but I'm having to reconsider the degree of my support given the very real life situation of people losing their lives at this point, monthly basis with these mass shootings.
Right.
And something has to change.
And I will tell you this, you're not the only one. From ontheissues.org, just a quick statistics on gun ownership. 91% of Americans say that there should be at least minor restrictions on gun ownership. 40% of all U.S. homes have guns. 81% of Americans say that gun control will be the important issue in determining which congressional candidate to vote for. And 57% of Americans say that there should be major restrictions on gun ban. I kind of read those out of order a bit.
No, those are very good, especially the 57%, because it shows
you are not alone.
That we have a majority of people in this country who want change. So isn't it a little strange and a little weird, a little interesting right now that nothing is being done about this?
It's mind-boggling.
Again, I'm not conspiracy-minded in terms of some sort of strange, weird conspiracies out there, but I think big money has big influence,
right.
And I think something fishy is going on with this, and it should be looked into.
And I really thought the kindergarten class would have motivated something. I really thought Columbine would have motivated something. That was when I was in high school, and I really thought that these reporters being shot on live TV would do something, and it's just not. It
seems to be so that people have been driven down into a sort of a malaise and apathy about this to such a degree that it's not even a conversation now. And it needs to be.
It really does.
That's the conversation we're having here. Anyway, look forward to anything you guys have to say about this. And with that, we're going to be wrapping up our 4th episode here. Thank you very much for listening. We love you guys. And we love the fact that you are, giving us your support and your positive feedback. And if you got negative feedback, bring it.
That's fine.
We'll take it. I really actually do enjoy constructive criticism. So I will encourage that. And anything else, well, whatever. So
I'll read it and giggle.
Exactly. So thank you very much for listening, folks, and we will talk again next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.